it's pretty clear that whoever is the next president is going to have to deal with some sort of U.S. government debt crisis.
Whitney Webb issues a stark warning about a future that could leave many stunned. She contends that the global financial scene is on the brink of collapse, and BlackRock, the most potent asset management company in the world, is ready to pull the strings, no matter who sits in the Oval Office following the next election. Whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, Webb suggests that the real threat to America's future resides not in politics, but in the nation's spiraling debt crisis, which has started to exceed GDP in a manner that seems dangerously unsustainable. With a palpable urgency, Webb brings up BlackRock's immense influence in shaping responses to economic crises. She unearths the chilling truth behind Trump's COVID-era partnership with BlackRock's Larry Fink. This wasn't just an ordinary bailout. This was the going direct reset, a little-known but powerful maneuver that funneled QE money straight into the hands of private corporations, sidestepping Main Street entirely. Instead of helping small businesses and American workers, BlackRock used this capital to boost its own ETFs, contributing to one of the largest wealth transfers in modern history. And according to Webb, it's set to happen again. Harris, if elected, is likely to place former BlackRock executives in key positions, just as Biden did. The chilling implication? BlackRock, the puppet master behind so many financial decisions, will be calling the shots in America's next major economic crisis, regardless of who wins the election.
So, for example, Trump, in his case, when there was a major economic crisis in the form of, what happened economically as a result of lockdown policy and because of COVID-19, the person that he and his administration reached out to was Larry Fink of BlackRock, who implemented something we can get into later.
Webb's most dramatic revelation comes when she connects the dots to programmable money. Money that could be controlled, surveilled, and even seized at will. The rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, has long been a looming threat, but Webb warns that the private sector is no better. Companies like Circle, backed by BlackRock, have created stablecoins that are just as insidious, with the power to manipulate not only personal finances, but the entire financial system. Trump's recent endorsement of stablecoins, delivered at a Bitcoin conference, adds yet another layer of complexity. What many fail to realize, she explains, is that these stablecoins are just as capable of enslaving the financial freedom of ordinary citizens as CBDCs.
But there are also things issued by the private sector, like stable coins, for example, that are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs are. So I think it's very likely in the event of a major debt crisis or some sort of crisis that damages significantly regular Americans' purchasing power, there will be an effort to onboard Americans onto one of those two versions of programmable, surveillable money. So it's possible, if Kamala wins, we could see a CBDC or something like that. But in the case of Trump, he's sort of come out in favor of stable coins. He did that recently at his speech at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year. And, stable coins are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs in theory are. And I think those, as people have rightly pointed out, are a threat to our financial privacy and ultimately our financial freedom.
Webb's warning is stark and dramatic. BlackRock's involvement in these digital currencies could lead to a future where money is not just a tool of exchange, but a means of control. As she paints this dystopian picture, she reveals how, during the COVID crisis, wealth flowed upward. The top 1% benefited massively, while ordinary Americans were left behind. BlackRock once again came out on top. But this, Webb insists, was just a dress rehearsal. We're heading toward a future where financial freedom could be stripped away, where BlackRock, with its fingers on the pulse of both politics and money, stands to gain more control than ever. As Webb continues, she dives deeper into the consequences of unchecked fiscal mismanagement, stressing that the debt crisis looming over the U.S. isn't just a hypothetical, it's a ticking time bomb.
If there is another crisis coming down the pike, which it seems there is, BlackRock is likely to do essentially the same thing, whatever policy they help design. And it really should be a point of public discussion why BlackRock has so much influence over what the Treasury Department does or what the Federal Reserve does. And really, as far as US COVID fiscal policy is concerned, which, by the way, even though that was started under Trump, a lot of this continued through into the Biden administration, who, again, Biden's top economic people are former BlackRock executives. Why is this particular asset manager on Wall Street so embedded with the development of US fiscal policy, which at times when that fiscal policy is meant to help regular Americans, it has not been doing that when BlackRock is involved. And really, this is something that most Americans don't even know happened,
The average American might have felt some relief with stimulus checks during the pandemic, but the bigger picture is far more disturbing. She argues that the inflation we see today results from a number of policies that stream the benefits in favor of Wall Street, not Main Street. And BlackRock, once again, was at the heart of it, overseeing a massive wealth transfer that deepens the divide between the ultra-wealthy and the average citizen. Indeed, she's not alone in her judgment. Many experts have questioned the unprecedented power BlackRock exercises over U.S. fiscal policy, largely in secret from public discourse. Why should a private asset manager like BlackRock be so deeply embedded in the decisions of the Treasury Department or the Federal Reserve? And it's a question that grows even more pressing when you realize that the very same BlackRock executives who played crucial roles under Trump have been allowed to retain their positions of authority in Biden's administration.
At the time the crisis happens is Henry Paulson, another former top guy from Goldman Sachs, that allegedly told members of Congress if they didn't bail out the banks that martial law may be declared in the United States, for example. And then when the COVID fiscal response happened, Steve Mnuchin is a former top Goldman Sachs executive as well. So as far as, the big parties, Democrat and Republican, they tend to appoint people to Treasury that come from these top Wall Street banks that have a history of predatory and arguably criminal behavior. And so, I think there needs to be a much larger structural change, I guess, to prevent that type of revolving door policy if we're going to see any sort of meaningful fiscal response to a crisis that actually does take, the needs of regular Americans into account, because historically that is not.
Webb really, in essence, talks about a shadowy financial empire where distinctions between Wall Street and government become blurred beyond recognition. As she pulls back the curtain, the implications are unnerving. The policies chiseled in the boardrooms of BlackRock are not written for the benefit of middle America, but to protect and grow the wealth of that financial elite. And as the prospect of another crisis approaches, it seems only a matter of time before BlackRock once again takes over the keys and directs the flow of capital to the benefit of Wall Street rather than working-class America. But Webb does not stop there. She talks about the realm of central bank digital currencies and is cautionary of the new frontier threatening government control.
But a lot of the same backers behind her, like Reid Hoffman, for example, envision the same type of policy coming to fruition. And I think we should focus on stopping those policy agendas in particular. And it's important to keep in mind, too, as far as programmable, surveillable, seizable money goes, as I said earlier, it's not just CBDCs. This can also be, that same regime can be implemented with stable coins.
In a world where financial freedom increases risks, the future path is only in decentralized ecosystems, to say the least. Pretty much Bitcoin, XRP, and other cryptocurrencies represent an exit. There is an opportunity to participate in microeconomies insulated from the old conventional financial system. Investment and diversification in such assets constitute a way to protect and secure one's wealth while reducing reliance on a system that seems more and more rigged. She also talks about how debt, fiscal irresponsibility, and BlackRock influence mushroom to almost alarming proportions. If Americans do not awaken to the reality of what is happening to them, they're in for a quick ride into handcuffs, financially shackled.
The military empire abroad and sort of maintain that hegemony and dominance. And historically, a lot of that was also directly related to dollar hegemony. The petrodollar system, which now we know has essentially been on the way out. But a colleague of mine, Mark Goodwin, put out a book a few years ago about this idea of the Bitcoin dollar system.
As Webb goes on to describe it, U.S. debt ballooned starkly back through the post-9/11 era, made up of foreign wars and unchecked military expansion that fueled an unprecedented surge in government borrowing. She argues that the United States entered into conflict after conflict to hold aloft the petrodollar system, a mechanism artificially propping up demand for U.S. currency based on oil trade. Today, as that system's grip tightens, another strategy seems to be emerging: the Bitcoin dollar system. The idea isn't new in Webb's justification. Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Or rather, that there now speculates the U.S. may somehow impose again a kind of petrodollar system regarding the value of global oil prices, this time being tied to the Bitcoin unit. In other words, because so many people buy Bitcoins with dollars, and because Bitcoins are, as they say, decentralized money, this currency is perceived as an alternative to classical forms of monetary currency. And that's where the plot thickens. The majority of the world's Bitcoin reserves already have the United States as their residence, and amazingly, the U.S. government ranks as one of the biggest owners of Bitcoin in the world. Webb advocates for this as part of a grand, well-thought-out scheme to keep the U.S. financially hegemonic by bringing Bitcoin into the same system they sought to disrupt. Indeed, Trump even intimated this tactic when he gave his Bitcoin conference speech, seeing virtue in using the cryptocurrency to strengthen rather than weaken the U.S. dollar.
You're going to be crushed if you don't elect me. The reason I've come to address the Bitcoin community today can be summed up in two very simple words: America first. If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. It's going to be. It's not going to be made anywhere else.
But this plan has complications. At the heart of what Bitcoin was designed to oppose, Bitcoin was a direct rebuke to reckless central banking and government debt, a way to break free from the bondage of fiat. Tying it to the U.S. dollar would mean abandoning the mission to challenge the debt-based monetary system. Instead, Bitcoin would become another cog in the machine, no longer the liberating force it once promised to be. In such a scenario, Bitcoin could paradoxically enable the very thing it sought to destroy. If the U.S. were to hyperinflate its currency, the price of Bitcoin, measured in those dollars, would soar, benefiting those who held it. But this windfall wouldn't extend to everyone. The average citizen, still reliant on dollars, would be left in the dust, watching their savings erode as the value of their currency plummets.
With Bitcoin, and most of the Bitcoin holdings in the world are concentrated in the United States, and the U.S. government itself is one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world. So I think there's sort of this effort there to do that, and this was actually implicit in Trump's speech that he gave at the Bitcoin conference a few months ago, sort of saying,
To manage this, stablecoins, which function as digital dollars, have been brought into the equation. These stablecoins, while offering a form of protection from inflation, are themselves tied to U.S. treasuries, buying up vast amounts of government debt. It's a delicate balance, one that sees stablecoins propping up the very debt that Bitcoin was once supposed to escape from. As Webb describes it, the U.S. government is crafting a system where stablecoins and Bitcoin coexist to absorb the immense debt it has accumulated, turning what was once a radical tool of financial freedom into a lifeline for an unsustainable fiscal empire. Yet despite all these intricate maneuvers, Webb warns that none of these strategies may be enough to truly absorb the astronomical debt the U.S. has accrued. In her eyes, the financial storm is not just looming, it's already here. And while Bitcoin, stablecoins, and other digital assets might offer temporary refuge, they are also being drawn into a system that could ultimately betray the ideals they were built upon. She also brings up another complex strategy being explored by those looking to address the ballooning U.S. debt: real-world asset tokenization. This relatively new concept involves turning tangible, finite resources, like land, ecosystems, or natural capital, into digital assets that can be bought, sold, and traded, much like cryptocurrencies. The most striking example she provides is the push to tokenize the Amazon rainforest, where each hectare of land, 750 million hectares in total, would be turned into a digital asset or security.
Right now, this idea of real world asset tokenization, there's this push into tokenizing what is referred to as natural capital or aspects, I guess, major, like even entire ecosystems, essentially, and tokenizing them and using that as sort of like, a store of wealth, of finite supply. So there's this one effort, for example, that's seeking to tokenize each hectare of the Amazon rainforest. And there's 750 million hectares. So there's a finite supply of this digital asset security that's tied to each hectare of the rainforest.
By assigning value to these finite resources, they would serve as a hedge against inflation, similar to how Bitcoin is framed, since their supply is fixed and not subject to artificial expansion. This plan to tokenize the rainforest and potentially other valuable ecosystems presents an intriguing alternative for absorbing some of the massive government debt. Like Bitcoin, the fixed supply of tokenized land or natural capital would make these assets anti-inflationary, offering a place to store wealth outside of traditional fiat currencies. However, this idea introduces further ethical and logistical challenges, as it essentially involves commodifying nature in a way that has not been done before. Webb's analysis implies that these initiatives, when combined, whether it's through Bitcoin, stablecoins, or tokenized natural assets, are all part of a broader push to maintain control over an unsustainable financial system. The strategies proposed by institutions like the Federal Reserve and BlackRock to stabilize debt and mitigate inflation increasingly blur the lines between traditional financial models and emerging digital economies. As these worlds converge, the stakes become even higher. At the end of the day, Webb's discussion brings to light a system in flux, where powerful financial interests are exploring every possible avenue, from digital currency manipulation to environmental tokenization, to maintain control over economic stability. While these strategies may stave off some of the immediate pressures of debt and inflation, they also make us think about the future of finance, environmental stewardship, and the role of digital assets in reshaping global power dynamics. How do you think this will turn out? Let us know in the comments below.